Thank you, Madame Speaker. Merci. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Willistic Creek, and we are not far from the Willistic River, which is also known as the St. John River, and that my home and constituency office are located on unceded Mi'kmaq territory. And these nations, along with the Passamaquoddy, represent the first peoples of the land we call New Brunswick, a land that was never surrendered, ceded to the British Crown. The rights and privileges enshrined in the peace and friendship treaties signed over 200 years ago have been under constant attack by this provincial government since the Premier and his cabinet were sworn in 2018. I do want to take a moment, Madam Speaker, before I address the budget specifically to, like many members here, to acknowledge the support of my family and friends, of my Green colleagues and the Green Caucus staff, my constituency staff, and all those who make it possible for me to proudly represent the people of Memramcook-Tantramar. As every member here knows, it takes sacrifices not just for the person elected, but those around them. And so I just want to start by saying thank you. And Madam Speaker, I am proud to represent the riding of Memramcook-Tantramar and the people who live there. It is an incredible riding. It's a beautiful riding and very proud of where we come from. I have one of the oldest communities and some of the oldest institutions in my riding, both Francophone and Anglophone. And we are the corridor that connects Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia to the country. We connect the rest of the country to the fellow maritime provinces, sometimes along bumpy roads, unfortunately, but I'm going to keep hammering away at the need to fix up that Route 16. And we are home to significant stretches of the province's coastline. We boast a large acreage of saltwater marshes. We have a diverse riding with the people who live there, and also with the ecosystems and the land. Umlumguk, or Fort Folly First Nation, is in the middle of the riding, and I also represent people from the towns of Sackville, villages of Memramcook, Dorchester, Port Elgin, many other unincorporated local service districts. But by the time I'm making a budget speech next year, I may have to name different places, because as we know that the boundaries are being redrawn within the province. And we will get into the nitty-gritty, into the details of the budget when we go to Estimates Committee. But what we have to work with right now is the budget speech and really the vision of what is in this budget. And unfortunately, what I see is that the government is out of touch. That's what I see coming across in this budget. And my riding is on the front lines with several major examples. And so I want to start by looking at health. And the pandemic has dominated our lives for the past 2 years and frankly continues to do so. And I want to thank all of the healthcare workers, the frontline workers, the staff, all of the people who have stepped up and worked hard to protect our communities. And I know that people are burnt out and tired at this point. But unfortunately, we are still in a pandemic. And I at this point, feel that the government is out of touch with what is happening with the pandemic. And I see we continue to have confusing communications and ableist policy, frankly, when it comes to what's happening with the management of the pandemic. And when we look at healthcare, Premier's out of touch on healthcare. this government is choosing to ignore the healthcare service delivery crisis that's playing out in rural communities. And I am concerned as well about basically the middleman that we have privatization of the management of our healthcare services. And we've seen, this isn't new, Madam Speaker, that the inability to recruit and retain healthcare professionals has meant labor and delivery units, such as in the Upper River Valley Hospital, the Campbellton Regional Hospital, have faced intermittent closures. We've seen hospitals across the province facing ER closures, acute care bed closures. We've seen that at the Sackville Memorial Hospital in my riding, but we're seeing it even just because of COVID, because the hospital system's still at red alert. They're struggling around HR. But, Madam Speaker, again, my riding is at the front lines when it comes to this, the erosion of services. In the Sackville Memorial Hospital emergency room and the acute care beds. And this winter, I've heard from constituents recounting horrific stories of trying to get in an ambulance and get to the hospital in Moncton when there were blizzards. And we saw blizzards hit several weeks in a row. And emergencies don't just happen from 8 to 4, but unfortunately, that's what the ER hours have been in Sackville for months and months now. And I'm proud that I was able to get another ambulance truck, a rapid response unit, on the road in my riding to help alleviate the harm being done by not having full access to our ER. However, when people normally live minutes down the road but are struggling to even get to the hospital, and putting the thing is the paramedics and the firefighters and anyone else who gets involved to try to get health care for these people are being put at risk. And there are solutions to recruitment and retention, and I am proud of the work that people in my community have been doing, and we've been working on recruitment, and I want to acknowledge the staff within Horizon who have cooperated and been working with them. But it's frustrating to think that for years and years and years, government was not doing its job on this, was not doing its job with recruitment and retention. And so I think people in my community hesitate to have hope around this and are frustrated that for years and years there have been attacks on our rural health care. And so here we are seeing the consequences of this. There's been just chronic neglect, frankly, of training enough nurses, of recruiting enough doctors, of transforming the system. And one of the things that needs to happen that specifically will impact the Sackville Memorial Hospital, but have effects elsewhere, is we need to have hospitalists so that not all general practitioners, as is the case in certain places, so that they can have a practice in the community and take on patients, but wouldn't be obligated to do ER shifts, and you would have doctors in the hospital that are hospitalists that would be doing that, because it's a recruitment challenge for certain doctors that don't want to be an ER doctor, and but they do want to set up a practice. And so this is a challenge that needs to be addressed, and things do need to change. But they haven't changed quickly enough, but we need that to happen. And we know that there are challenges not just with hospital staff, but other caregiving professions. And for too long, people in caregiving professions have been underpaid and undervalued. And what we really need is to ensure that they are treated fairly, they are valued, they have access to the training they need, the resources they need, the pay that they deserve, and that they are adequately compensated, that there's pay equity in the caregiving sectors. And we know that that is not happening, Madam Speaker, but that is what is needed, and we need it across our society. And it is especially important when we look at the needs we have for caregivers. And we know that there are challenges when it comes to nursing homes. And what's interesting, Madam Speaker, is that there are tax policies being rolled out, certain tax cuts, but not as targeted as one would hope. If there were going to be tax cuts for nursing homes, it sounds like the forestry companies are also going to benefit from that, and they're saying we didn't even ask for that. So, Madam Speaker, these policies need to be targeted, need to be really benefiting those who need it. And, Madam Speaker, speaking of needs in healthcare, as I said, I will never waver from the fact that we need to restore full services at the Sackville Memorial Hospital for the ER, acute care beds, and frankly, there's more that's needed in our rural communities. And we have a successful day surgery program. The OR runs smoothly, and there's room to expand more healthcare services that are needed in our rural areas. People need nurse practitioners and need doctors, and frankly, why would however many people that need to access a certain service have to drive to Moncton when it could be in our community? Anyone who's tried to park anywhere near the Moncton Hospital, for example, understands that's something Sackville, we've got parking. So that's what's needed is for the services to be really accessible, and not just accessible in terms of having access in our communities, which is important. Transportation is a major barrier when it comes to healthcare, but many other things, whether it's employment and whether it's accessing other services, and we shouldn't discount the need to be able to travel to see people in our lives, whether that's to see friends and family. And so I would like to see anything on public transportation. It is absolutely ridiculous that public transportation is just being left alone, basically. There's not enough of a focus on what are we going to do to have the buses, the trains, the active transportation routes, the carpools, whatever it is. And I know some of that it is in place because community members are figuring it out. Government needs to be responsible for having a strategy on public transportation, and we see that there's often a lack of strategy for a lot of these things. We see these piecemeal bits of policy that aren't always fully thought through. The rent cap and the confusion around that is coming to mind. But, Madam Speaker, in addition to being able to access through transportation or having access near where people live, there are a lot of parts of healthcare that are not accessible if you don't have the money. And it creates a tiered healthcare system. And so there are people who have diabetes. There are people who who need medical equipment or medications and they can't access it. There are people who need mental health care and other treatments who can't afford it and can't get it either through what we need is a pharmacare program. We need to have psychotherapy covered. We need to have all parts of our bodies covered by the healthcare system. So we need our teeth, our mental health, our medications. We need to make sure that people are not left to decide, okay, do I ration my medications or my medical supplies, or do I eat? Because frankly, Madam Speaker, that is the decision that some people are making. And Madam Speaker, I also want to speak about the climate crisis, and it should surprise no one when I say that this Premier and his government are out of touch with the climate crisis, pretending, frankly, that it's still a distant threat when it is playing out all around us. It is not being taken seriously, Madam Speaker. And what I can't understand is how the Premier refuses to see the writing on the wall. Sound financial management, which is something that the Higgs government says that they're all about, that means accurately assessing and mitigating the risks to your bottom line. And to me, the climate crisis is about people's lives, it's about people's livelihoods, it is about our communities, but it's also really expensive to deal with the fallout of this, frankly, this economic system that believes that constant growth is the path forward, and it's impossible. And we would need many planets to be able to stay on this path, and we don't have that, Madam Speaker. But the Premier is in denial about what will happen to the economy, what is already happening, about the costs to our health, to our economy, and what is needed for the health of our natural resources. So what happens when our monoculture forests fall prey to migrating pests or new diseases? What happens when a dry summer leaves them vulnerable to fires like we've seen on the West Coast? Madam Speaker, what is playing out in British Columbia is terrifying, and it could happen here. I think of the flooding in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Madam Speaker, and I have nightmares about what could happen in my community. We are a coastal province. I think of the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the other infrastructure in and around coastal communities or near rivers. Inland flooding is a major problem as well. We've had tastes of significant flooding, but we have not seen the adaptations and the mitigation needed to deal with what is going to become more and more regular. So the bill will come due, Madam Speaker, and we need a just transition. And that is clearly not part of the vision of this government, to have a just transition that is founded on Indigenous rights, that is founded on making sure to absolutely reduce emissions. We need to get beyond just thinking of net zero, but we're not on the path we need to be, Madam Speaker. The time is ticking. And once again, Madam Speaker, my riding is on the front lines of this. We've seen wells running dry. We've seen flooding, coastal and inland. We've seen the Chignecto Isthmus report is finally out, but Madam Speaker, this needs to move as quickly as possible, and we need the investments from the federal government, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, to address this and to deal with the Chignecto Isthmus, yes, and the whole diking system, to deal with the communities that are at risk and make long-term plans, because that's really missing, Madam Speaker, long-term vision, really understanding what we're up against. And Madam Speaker, I've spoken about public transportation, and when we look at the roads and infrastructure, the way things are going, DTI is never going to catch up to where they need to be. They're working with asset management, but there are assets that are not being managed. There are roads that are in disrepair. A few years ago, didn't a school bus fall into a pothole and get stuck? Madam Speaker, this is out of control, and we're never going to get caught up if DTI continues to be underfunded. And DTI faces severe challenges when it comes to the climate crisis. And when I think of our youth facing, staring down the climate crisis, and dealing with eco-anxiety, they've had so many challenges when it comes to the pandemic, when it comes to looking at what's coming with the climate crisis and looking for leadership. And we've applauded the youth for being leaders, but really what they're saying is we shouldn't have to be doing this. We shouldn't have to be standing out here calling on government to do something. Government needs to take control and actually invest, actually make the decisions, actually change things. We need transformation. And they're living through late-stage capitalism, and that will bring anyone down. It is such a challenging time. And Madam Speaker, things are worse than we think. If you follow any news around biodiversity, around the climate crisis, looking at the ice shelf in Antarctica, climate scientists, everything they say is that it's just worse than we thought. But that is not reflected here, Madam Speaker, in this budget. The level of the housing crisis, the seriousness is not reflected either. The Premier is out of touch with tenants, and he's so far removed from the renters market that he can only understand it by having sympathy for landlords and thinking that way. And of course, not all landlords are bad. That isn't the point, Madam Speaker. The point is that there are people who are becoming unhoused at a higher and higher rate. There are people who cannot afford to live in New Brunswick. And it sounds great, growth, growth, growth. We can't grow forever, but what that's meaning is that people are being forced out of their homes, and there's nowhere for them to go. And so there are examples of people having their rent going up and then being forced out of their housing. There's rent evictions. There's spikes of hundreds and hundreds of dollars just forcing people to leave, and they have nowhere to go. They can't afford it, or they get discriminated against. And I know that ministers like to stand up and read us 1-800 numbers, but that doesn't solve the problem, Madam Speaker. Because what happens is you have recent graduates or a single parent or recently retired widow who come to my office, and they want to know how they're going to pay for housing. It's unaffordable. It's costing more than the share it should in their budget. And there are many people whose budgets are far too low. And so I want to talk about housing, but related is people's income and people on social assistance, people with disability benefits. It's not high enough, Madam Speaker, and we need a basic income. And I heard someone else on the other side of the floor talking about that when talking about money circulating in the economy. Well, basic income, you want to see money circulate in the economy, that is what would happen. And when people who have lower incomes are given an increase in their income, when they're given a basic income, they meet their needs, they're able to focus on the social determinants of health, they can buy the groceries that they need, they can take care of themselves, they can get the employment they need, they can overcome obstacles. When we give tax breaks, when we give money to the rich, it does not circulate in our economy. It might buy some capital and displace some workers, but it goes elsewhere. It goes to tax havens, it goes and circulates on financial markets and disrupts economies. Madam Speaker, that is not who we should be giving our money to. And unfortunately, decades of economics courses have taught the wrong thing. They've had it wrong, Madam Speaker. And it's frustrating because governments have then based their policies on these misguided assumptions of economics. We need to rethink our economy. And maybe someone will say I shouldn't be discussing capitalism and the economy, but frankly, this is what it comes down to. This is a provincial budget, and government after government's gotten it wrong, and we need to rethink the system. Pardon? Am I being heckled? Even while housing advocates and tenants were sounding the alarm, especially during the pandemic, because out-of-control rent hikes and evictions were happening, the Premier and the government refused to acknowledge that there was even a problem and looked to the market to solve the problem. Madam Speaker, that looking to the market to solve the problem has been the strategy for decades, and it's not working. And a new factor is the sharp spike in the commodification of housing. So the housing is now being looked at as really, an investment. And again, we talk about how, money, speculation money, can move around, it's going into investments, it's driving up the prices. What we need is investment in public housing. And I saw the government side get up today and cheer for 172 units over 3 years, if I have the numbers right. My goodness, Madam Speaker, that is not enough. The housing list has increased by thousands, Madam Speaker. It is absolutely unacceptable for there to be so few units built and for the government to abdicate its responsibility when it comes to basic human rights. People don't have housing, people don't have food, people don't have access to basic things in New Brunswick. It is just shocking. How could there be a budget that doesn't make sure that every child can eat? How could there be a budget that doesn't make sure that everyone has somewhere to live? It boggles the mind, Madam Speaker. And so, no, this budget does not sufficiently address this crisis. The rent cap it offers is only for 1 year. I still don't understand how it's going to work, especially the retroactive portion, Madam Speaker, and it's leaving landlords free to raise the rent as much as they want next January. The rent cap isn't even legally enforceable until at least May. It's putting the onus on tenants to overturn these rent increases above the cap. And Madam Speaker, the system's already hard for people to navigate, and people feel so defeated. Like I said, they're told to call 1-800 numbers that basically go nowhere. It's frustrating, and it puts the onus on them. And Madam Speaker, many people are in survival mode. They're at their wits' end. And to put this on them and make them responsible for chasing down landlords, it simply is not good public policy. And it would have been great if the Green Bill to bring in a tool to create a rental cap had been passed last year, because then the government would be able to get going on this. They could have gotten going on it a lot sooner and looked at what was needed. Unfortunately, it's too little too late. The budget also misses the mark on affordable housing, as I've said. The wait list has gone up, and we need investment in public housing, in nonprofit housing, in cooperative housing, and we need stronger tenant protections. Madam Speaker, one of the things that I keep seeing is that landlords are refusing to rent to families. If you have children, too bad about you. That's what's happening. And there's not even that much rental stock that would accommodate a family in some cases, but the landlords are turning them away. And it puts people in a really difficult position as well, because then are they supposed to complain to a landlord about a landlord they want to rent from? There needs to be stronger protections. There needs to be investment in the housing, but there needs to be stronger protection for those who are renting. Et Madame, le Premier ministre est déconnecté lorsqu'il s'agit de la valeur du patrimoine, de la culture française dans notre province, et préserver et favoriser la vitalité des communautés françaises au Nouveau-Brunswick est une partie essentielle de l'histoire et de la musique du Nouveau-Brunswick. Elle a une valeur économique directe et une valeur culturelle incommensurable. Et Madame la Présidente, le village de Maramcook dans ma circonscription est le berceau de l'Acadie. Et soutenu par les Mi'kmaq, les colons français ont tenu bon à Maramcook et ont survécu à la déportation. L'Institut de Maramcook est un monument à cette histoire. L'Institut, c'est le cœur de Maramcook. À l'origine, c'était le Collège Saint-Joseph, la première université francophone de l'Est du Canada, qui a ouvert ses portes en 1864. C'est aussi à cet endroit qu'a eu lieu le premier congrès national acadien en 1881. Et c'est très important, cette histoire-là, et c'est très important de reconnaître l'histoire des Acadiens, de la langue française dans notre province. Et mon grand-père était acadien, et ma mère était née une Leblanc. Mais on a vu que les Acadiens ont dû lutter pour leur langue, pour leur culture, pour l'histoire dans cette province. Et après avoir trahi le village de Maramcook en annulant les plans de rénovation du bâtiment en 2018, ce Premier ministre et son gouvernement refusent de voir le potentiel et essayent maintenant de vendre la propriété. Madame la Présidente, notre Premier ministre voit cette province comme un tableau de dettes et d'actifs et ne voit pas que nous sommes des communautés diverses et des personnes diverses, avec des histoires riches qui peuvent être différentes de la sienne. Son abandon de Meroncook et de cette pierre de touche culturelle n'est qu'un autre symptôme de son approche étroite d'esprit. Nous devons investir dans l'avenir, réinventer ce bâtiment et ne pas reléguer son histoire dans le passé. And Madam Speaker, I must address what is happening when it comes to municipal reform in this province. And the minister responsible for municipal reform, he did listen a lot last year. And unfortunately, at this point, it seems that the listening has stopped. After promising to listen to communities and to empower them, the listening abruptly stopped when the white paper came out at the end of last year. And in my riding, there were requests, direct requests from the village of Dorchester, from the town of Sackville, for the minister to reconsider some of the plans that had been laid out, to listen to what the community was wanting, to do more consultation. I appealed to the minister as well to listen, to make sure that the decisions being made were what was needed for the community. And unfortunately, it seems that the elected officials and what they were asking for, those requests were dismissed. And I think that the municipal officials are right now trying to do the best they can to navigate a confusing, inconsistent, it seems a bit like fly by the seat of your pants system. But it seems that the private interests, like landowners, for example, J.D. Irving, that there have been requests accepted to exclude their lands from an Entity 40, for example. And is it to avoid paying taxes if they were to be in that entity? Is it to avoid any bans on glyphosate that a municipality might want to put in? Would it be to avoid a ban on clear cutting that a municipality might want to bring in? And again, it's all connected, Madam Speaker. If you go back to climate change, to flooding, to biodiversity, and with the current plan and the way that rural districts have been carved out, there's no chance of any community forests or community control of resources in this community, let alone proper consultation and agreements with the First Nations of this that were here before New Brunswick was called New Brunswick. But unfortunately, it seems that the timelines, which are arbitrary, and the process is just the minister has been unwilling to adjust. And it is frustrating to think that private interests have been listened to when elected officials weren't. And I think of, it seems that this forestry land has been taken out. Right from the beginning, Calhoun was left in a rural district, and that is in my riding, Madam Speaker. And Calhoun, the people of Calhoun, already have quarries in their backyard. They know what it's about. They know what it does to their roads, to their air, to their water, and new quarries proposed. And what we saw is there were petitions that were submitted where people wrote against it. There was a community meeting, and I attended it online, and everyone spoke against it except the business owner. Even the planner recommended against allowing this, but the minister responsible approved it despite everyone speaking out against it. And I am very concerned that that is going to be continue to be how rural areas are treated, where the minister can just override the decisions and what is wanted by the local communities. I don't see how it's going to be different, Madam Speaker, from what is currently happening. And so, Madam Speaker, as usually happens, you think 40 minutes is a lot, and then you look at the clock and realize you're only partway through your speech. But, Madam Speaker, I want to talk about this notion of being out of touch and missing the point. And if you look at when we look at the Premier, Mr. Speaker, in his fixation to balance the books, the Premier is missing the point. The people he serves. He's choosing to be blind to suffering. He's preferring to be an out-of-touch administrator, and that is his comfort zone, Madam Speaker. It is time for the Premier to get a little uncomfortable and see the suffering of the people in this province. Let's talk about Lexi Dakin, the young girl who took her own life after being sent away from the emergency room without care for her urgent mental health needs. Her family has been working tirelessly to see changes in our mental health care system. Come on, Madam Speaker. Let's talk about Chantal Moore, the young Indigenous woman who was surprised by a police visit to her home in the middle of the night and was killed by that officer. And this government still won't commit to an inquiry into the systemic racism in policing and our justice system. And the Premier and the government have refused to acknowledge the systemic racism that exists, Madam Speaker. Let's talk about the woman in Fredericton who died in the cold this winter with a treatable condition because she was denied health care due to her housing status. And the Premier sticks his head in the sand and pretends that our system and housing are fine and the market's going to correct it, that they just need tweaking, that this incremental piecemeal policy is going to fix it, the free market will work it out. But, Madam Speaker, they need an overhaul. And pretending isn't going to change, is not going to, it's not going to bring these people back, and it's not going to save lives if we don't actually overhaul the system. It's going to backfire. And if we're blind to problems, you'll be blind to solutions. Madam Speaker, there are so many things that need to be done. We need to expand midwifery. We need to ensure access to reproductive justice all across the province. We need to fix the household income policy, again, tweaking, and people who have a disability and want to get married still cannot, so that household income policy, it's just incremental change that's not doing what needs to be done, Madam Speaker. So it's discriminating against people with disabilities, and it's an ableist policy, and it seems to be specifically targeting women with disabilities. And Madam Speaker, we need to expand rapid response teams for mental health services. We need to expand mental health court access in this province. We need pay equity, as I mentioned, Madam Speaker. We need to invest significant amounts in energy efficiency in homes, especially for those who have lower incomes and are the most vulnerable, and not this nuclear boondoggle, the SMRs. It's just, even if it was a good idea, it wouldn't be fast enough, but it's not a good idea. Madam Speaker, we need rural internet for the people of this province. We need to ensure that private woodlot owners have access to the markets. We need to expand local food processing, distribution, invest in food security and food sovereignty. We don't need a war on drugs, Madam Speaker. We need mental health and addiction services to be better funded. Madam Speaker, small businesses have been ignored. Many were excluded from the really small potatoes programs that were rolled out during the pandemic, but many are struggling, Madam Speaker. We need to invest in arts and culture. We need to at least try to match some of our neighboring provinces and what they're looking at. Madam Speaker, this idea of constant growth, there is some growth in some areas, but it also means that there are people who can't afford to live in our communities. We need to stop focusing on growth and GDP and actually look at the well-being of the people in our communities. And so, Madam Speaker, if the people of the province are tuning in today and may hear this speech, I want them to hear this. We can do better. It doesn't have to be this way. We can imagine a life where people sleep easy at night, where they know that if their child falls ill or their landlord sells their building, their car breaks down, or gas prices rise, that everything's going to be okay and that they're going to be okay, and that their leaders are looking out for them. And that is the New Brunswick I'm committed to, and that is the New Brunswick we need. One where people are not just the rich or well-connected or privileged are taken care of, Madam Speaker. One that actually centers well-being. And as we move forward, that people are not left behind, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank you for the chance to address this speech, Madam Speaker, and thank you very much for the time.